framework on what we're going to call it buyer consultation, but really is not everything that shines is gold. That's my file name under this, right? Because what I find a lot is that a lot of the referrals that we get are, you got somebody's number and you got somebody's name and you have no idea where they stand. So for you as a realtor, you're probably at risk of wasting too much of your time chasing this one person without knowing anything, right? Without knowing if they're going to potentially be a client for you to invest time into. And honestly, for me as well, if I get, let's say 10 leads and you ask just a few questions, then those are 10 prospects. Not everybody gets to be a prospect. The very basics always are going to be, for you, if you meet somebody, are you pre-approved? Pre-approved is just going to tell you if they're already working with a lender, not necessarily the in-depthness of what that lender is offering or what that person qualifies for. So let's say the person says, no, why do I need to be pre-approved? First of all, we always want to know that you are pre-approved, because then you know what you're shopping for. This person might walk in and say, I want to buy a $400,000 home. Well, that's great. But in their mind, they might have an $1,800 payment. And we all know that's not going to work, but they don't know. So you really don't know what their purchase power is, and they really don't know what their monthly commitment is going to be unless we get them pre-approved, pre-qualified at a minimum, right? So in order to pre-qualify somebody, you need very basic information. We want to know, are you working with a lender currently? So has your credit been ran? How is your credit? What do you think about your credit? If the buyer tells you, my credit is not that great, then you want to ask, why not? Have you had a bankruptcy? That actually delays your purchase time, right? If you have a bankruptcy that was filed a year ago, but do you know when it was discharged? When you file it is when your attorney takes that file to the courthouse. And it may take 3, 5, 6 months to get approved or discharged, right? The discharge date is what counts, not your original filing date. But if you have multiple filings, that changes everything. Are you a first-time home buyer? There is a lot of stigma around first-time home buying. The benefit to first-time home buying really is going to be majority down payment assistance. Do you qualify for it or not? You're going to qualify for FHA as long as you don't have another FHA loan. So are you buying for the first time ever? You're asking how experienced you are with the process. Have you been through it before? There's a lot that you can read into that simple question of, are you a first time home buyer? Yes, sir?
Question, I know because you talked about credit in regards to, could you speak to someone and say, oh, I don't know how my credit is, it's not good. Can you speak to someone who's had their identity stolen and kind of like what kind of steps that they need to take to be able to become pre-approved? Because literally met somebody yesterday who said her credit was 800s and then her identity was stolen and now it's in the 600s, and so she can't buy a home and they don't know how long that process is going to take. Apparently those things always stay on their credit. So have you had any experience with that, and can you speak to that?
Those things, as far as the report that they've done, there's a lot of implications when you're talking about stolen identity. So if somebody stole your identity, did you lock up all your credit? Did you call every bureau and stopped anybody and everybody from running their credit, your credit, or taking credit in your name? What steps did you take? Are you talking to an attorney? Are you disputing it with the bureaus? We need to really get into where the process is. If you're just the person says, somebody stole my credit, ran some credit cards and disappeared, so now I have late payments, now I have collections, now I have a foreclosure because of stolen identity. We want to know what the steps that person has taken before we can truly assess where they are. Because that could have happened 10 years ago. And it could have been settled then. The accounts probably were disputed, and if they were settled, then those should be off their credit. So we need to find out, we need to run their credit to know, to see firsthand where they are in that process. From running their credit and assessing where they are, then we have the ability to determine if they are on the right path to fixing the damage that was made, or how to help them fix the damage that was made. But we can always, we always want to do it firsthand. I guess it's my answer on that one.
Okay.
Do you guys have any credit questions?
Well, if you know people that had the identity theft or worried about it, don't you tell them that you need to freeze all 3 of the credit bureaus and then unfreeze it when you're ready to buy a big purchase? They're having problems with that. That's what I was told.
So theoretically, yes. I'll tell you, my 3 daughters' credits are frozen with all 3 bureaus. They're not going to be running credit. Actually, I just unfroze my college student, so she's done. But my teenager's credit is frozen because everybody's vulnerable. But at the end of the day, we really can't advise as attorneys. So my suggestion would always say, I can advise you as an attorney, but have you thought about doing this? Clarifying always that you're not advising them as an attorney, right? Just like I have to say, I am not
An
a
attorney.
finance, I'm not an accountant. You should take it up with them. That would be my suggestion on that. What was your question on this?
In regards to credit, you asked about credit. The rapid rescore. So someone's working on their credit, they come in and they've got a 620 and they need to get to a 650. Kind of like, how long does that process take? Can you just kind of explain a little bit about rapid rescoring?
On a rapid rescore or credit analysis, what the severity of why you're there is going to count. So let's say you have 5 collections. If they're current and they're pending, it's going to be difficult to overcome that hurdle. If you had 2 late payments, then that's a faster approach. So I would run a simulator, and that simulator would tell me if you do A, B, C, or D, your immediate rescore would be here. Whether that is immediate, it will always give me the option of in 3 months, if I do A, B, C, and D, what's gonna happen? So it can be a process of an immediate process, depending on the severity, and it can take sometimes 2 years, especially if you have a recent bankruptcy or a recent foreclosure, a recent short sale. Those are gonna take time. And obviously the time that they were discharged will affect us on the back end ability to do anything, to move forward as far as financing, right? Any other questions on credit? Great. So the other thing that we want to ask too is going to be in regards to income. How long have you been working? We need 2 years of history. We're gonna find people or recent college grads that, let's say you're a doctor and you've only been working for the last 6 months, but you went to school for 20 years to be a doctor, right? We actually can count a year of their schooling towards their income because they've been in school. We can actually take different trades if they have been working and they've been switching jobs or job fields. We need 2 years of continuing employment.
Can you clarify if a client has 2 years in the same field, 2 or more years in the same field, but they switch from W-2 over to 1099 in that same time period, but they still have more than 2 years in the same field. What happens in a case like that?
Your time clock will start again because you're now self-employed. You just started 6 months ago as a 1099 in the same field. We don't know. We have no way to quantify if your business will be successful. So now that you are, you're self-employed, we are going to need 2 years of your tax returns as self-employed to be able to show that your company is solvent and will continue.
So the other year and a half of W-2 is basically null and void.
Correct.
Even though they were in the same industry. They
Correct.
still have to start over like it's ground zero.
Now, if you turn that, right? If you went, for example, I have a client currently that was self-employed. He worked for this company, that company, and that company number 1, 2, and 3 during his self-employment. And then he went from the company that he worked for as a contractor, as an independent contractor, and became a W-2 employee, doing the same thing for the same company, and has only been doing so for a year. That's completely different. We can take that into account because you have worked for that company for the last 5 years, and now you're still working for that company, but you're now a W-2 employee. You did the same job in the same field, but went backwards. Does that make sense? So if you're newly self-employed, we want to make sure that you're
So it's only a problem if you're going from W-2 to 1099.
Correct.
Not the opposite.
correct.
So I could go from 1099 to W-2 and the next month qualify to buy a home as if I've been there for 2 years?
For the same company.
Has to be the same, or is it the same company or
Same-
industry?
That's going to be the same employer. That's why I can make that seamless transition.
Okay.
So it's the same employer indirectly.
Mhm.
So we can verify that you've been doing the same thing for the same company, just wearing a different size shoe. Yes? Now, short sales foreclosures, it is important that you help me out as a lender, as a realtor, for me to be able to be successful with your lending side too. We wanna know if you have a short sale. We wanna know if you have a foreclosure. But we wanna know when. Because that date will always be important. It can be, I had a bankruptcy 7 years ago. I had a short sale 2 months ago. Or I had a foreclosure 5 years ago. All of those will get us to different pathways. So always ask that question. If you're not a first-time home buyer. And the same questions apply for anybody that is looking to be counted in for the income and or credit on the loan. So it's not just for the primary, for the borrower, it's for the borrower and any co-borrowers that we want to add.
How long is the wait time from foreclosure short sale to being able to qualify?
It depends on the loan program. So my most forgiving program, anybody's most forgiving program is always going to be VA. FHA, we're gonna go on bankruptcy 2 years. We're going to go foreclosure 3 years. Short sale 2 years. Remember I asked you, have you ever filed bankruptcy? If you have filed and it was declined, that counts for an FHA loan.
That's nuts. I always reward people that you think shouldn't be. It's just so weird.
So you just keep in mind that, again, it matters what program we're trying to qualify you into as far as what we can do with your financing. Down payment assistance. We have FHA and conventional for down payment assistance, right? Still in the same program, different parameters. Down payment assistance for conventional will allow you to have multiple filings and be able to purchase in 2 years. They'll only give you 3% on your down payment. Your interest is gonna be a little bit higher, and your MI is gonna be a little bit higher. FHA won't allow you to do it in 2 years. If you had multiple filings, we'll need 3. So there's so many variables. Always ask us the question, because your job is to be out there and find the beautiful house and get it under contract and be done. Our job is to find you the right program for your customer. But there is a lot of moving pieces as far as who's right for what. Do you guys have any program specific questions that you might encounter, might have in mind as far as current potential customers?
I do know that on a VA loan, there's no credit score requirement and that your company does not have an overlay. But my question is, at what credit score do you have to, on a VA loan, go into manual underwriting instead of being able to do just an automated one?
580, below 580.
All right. Thank you.
That doesn't really, on your side of the transaction, that will be transparent. That just means the software is not going to give you the answer. We have to evaluate the whole package separately. And it happens. There's also debt to income ratios, loan to value ratios, all of those vary for all the different programs.
What is the highest debt to income ratio you can go on a VA, or is there a set number, or does it really depend on variables on how high?
It is
the
always
debt to income
it is always going to be on variables. On VA, it's a little more complex because we have to have our debt to income calculated, but we also have to take into account your cost of living currently. So there's different. I would say for VA, you're safe on 55.
But you can go above.
Generally,
You can go above 55 if you have good compensating factors.
correct. There's no set number.
There's no set number. Okay, thank you.
It's discretion at that point for the underwriting.
So on down payment assistance, would you be able to pay the MI up front, or is that not allowed?
Only if you go conventional. FHA will always have MI.
Okay.
So you can do, and I mean, that's always a factor, right? If you use, we had one of those, market it. We had a 219 purchase. We went conventional because the condo wasn't FHA warrantable.
Okay.
We used a maybe $5,000 seller credit for closing costs, and we had an excess of money. So we took that money and paid the MI off. Their interest rate might have been a little bit higher than FHA, but
They
they're
don't have a,
correct. They don't have MI. So there's puzzles.
Okay.
There's always
So for FHA, you always have to have MI.
correct.
Yeah.
But if you evaluate both options, it depends on the scenario, right? That specific file, they had good credit history. They had high FICOs, probably in the mid 7s.
I thought it was 7s, yeah.
And their debt to income was close, but because of their repayment history, we were able to. Their MI, your MI is going to vary.
Right.
It's not a set amount. It's going to vary on your debt to income, your loan to value, your credit score. So if your MI is lower, you do have the ability to prepay it,
Got it.
but only going conventional.
But conventional, you have to have 20% down.
No.
Is that right?
No.
No.
There's a lot of. You have to have 20% down if you don't want to pay mortgage insurance.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
But that doesn't make it conventional. That's just that's so. Yes. So you just sell the house. We'll figure out the loan. There's a lot of moving pieces,
I know, I hear you.
but we can go down payment assistance, 3% down on conventional. And the state is gonna pay that for you, that 3%.
Well, that's nice.
And we're going to be able to use closing cost assistance as well. So between those two, we might be able to have enough funds to pay for that, MI up front.
And on that program, is that like for low income, or you have to have a certain?
Under
income?
$128,000 a year,
Okay,
Household income, right?
household income, $128,000 a year.
okay,
So it's not really
not that bad,
correct. That would be a great benefit for a first-time homebuyer.
yeah.
Only if you've never owned, another good one. Does anybody know what a first-time homebuyer is?
Anybody who hasn't bought in the last 2 years?
3.
3 years.
3 years. 3 years, there's been nothing under your name. There's not been a property, somebody didn't put you on title. That would make you a homeowner. And a lot of people think I didn't apply for the loan, my grandma just put me on the title. That makes you a homeowner.
Mm.
3 years. Never owned or 3 years. You are a first-time homebuyer. Do you guys wanna go into? There's more questions. I see your wheels turning.
No, my wheels are just turning right now. A lot of things.
So the 3 important factors to consider, right? That you, as a realtor, you wanna know this upfront to know if you're gonna go chase this. Credit, employment, assets. You wanna know how their credit is, their FICO, their history, whether they have a short sale, foreclosure, bankruptcy. You wanna know how long they've been employed with their current employer. And if that doesn't cut the 2 years, expand on it. You need 2 years. And we wanna know what their assets, and their assets can be so many things. They can be a 401k. It can be an existing property. It can be a gift that grandmother's gonna give them so that they can buy a house. An asset is basically anything that we can turn liquid.
What's minimum credit scores? I know that there's some adjustments going on as far as as low as 580 is what I've heard, but how much lower than that are programs that you have that you're seeing out there as far as minimum credit scores for those who think that their credit's bad and they don't qualify to buy a home?
When you start dropping into the credit scores, you're going to find more compensating factors are required. So just minimum credit score, 580 is a good safe for FHA, but you're not gonna get down payment assistance, right? No, you are gonna get down payment assistance because there is those out there. It depends on what program you're trying to fit and why that score is that low. If it's, I just filed for bankruptcy, I had a foreclosure, and I haven't paid any of my, Chapter 11 agreement in the last year, then you could have a 650 and still not be able to be financeable. So it's not any just one factor. There's no minimum FICO when it comes to VA, but there's other factors that will be taken into account that could make that a decline.
I have a question. What's the quickest you could close a loan if it's not VA? Say somebody needs to be out of their place in 20 days. Is that possible?
So New American
How
Funding,
they advise if they say, I need to be out of my apartment in 30 days and I just found this house and we haven't even submitted the offer yet.
you're right.
So we
The minimum, New American Funding has a 14-day guarantee, 14 business days, not 14 calendar days. Because we can't make anything happen when people aren't at work. If it's cash, 10 days. Right? Because you have to go through the motions even for cash. Okay, 14 days. I would say even if it's VA. even if it's a jumbo, 14 days. 14 days, now keep this in mind. Those 14 days will mean 14 days from when the loan officer receives every piece of documentation required from the buyer.
So we can put 14 days instead of 30 on the RPA now?
Business days! That's going to be 21.
Yeah, 21 days for loan.
There is no rules that says we can't close them sooner. You will have those squeaky clean files that we could get through in no time. But there's no further commitment. 14 business days. So ideally, give us everything we have up front. Once you start building this rapport with your buyer, you already know them. If we're gonna have a home buyer orientation, let's give them a needs list. Let's know that we need 2 years taxes, 2-month bank statements, 1 month pay stubs.
Say that again, please.
221. 2 years taxes, 2-month bank statements, 1 month pay stubs. If you want down payment assistance, we're gonna need 3 years taxes. If you wanna go VA, we're gonna need a DD 214. If they're active duty, they don't have a DD 214. We're gonna need a statement of service. So there's always variables.
They're not active?
If they're currently active,
Oh, okay.
they will not have a DD 214.
Got it.
We will need a statement of service. With those tax returns, we need W-2s to be included. W-2s, 1099s, and those tax returns need to be full and complete. We don't want the tax returns to be the 1040s, 2 front pages, and then we see that they have a Schedule C and now they're have a little side business and we don't have that file. So we need the full tax returns with their W-2s or 1099s, however they're compensated. Any other questions?
I want to know more about your first-time homebuyer programs, because the one that I'm most familiar with, of course, is the Cal HAPA program. Again, I know that there's limits on how much funding is available for those programs. I was just recently told that I believe beginning of March there's some changes that are coming along with some of those programs. Can you speak to those programs specifically as far as like funding, what's out there, for those programs for home buyers?
So there's different programs, but as you mentioned, the Cal HAPA is going to be your more, not necessarily forgiving, but more beneficial to the customer. Just because you're gonna have your interest rate is gonna be lower, your debt to income does get limited. It does become limited when it becomes a down payment assistance, right? Even if we're going FHA. Let's say we're doing down payment assistance for Cal HAPA, it's going to be 45% debt to income. When you're using down payment assistance, you either cut it or you don't. There is no flexibility. It's hard lines. There's no, but it's only 41 or 45.2%. No, you're 45, 45.000001, you don't cut it, you don't qualify. So we have to take all those into consideration. That's for an FHA, right? Cal HAPA. But then FHA, we can go 55%. So it's not necessarily just
whatever works for you, just
black or white. We want to be able to, if we have the ability to use the funds for a down payment, we want to help the borrower do that, because they're going to have a much greater purchase power when it comes to their monthly obligations. When it comes to your Shinoa, you're going to have different scenarios. You said something about the funding.
Right, is that like funding? I've heard like the funding can run out and there's not enough, and is that true?
That's
Didn't that stop or no?
no.
No? Oh.
It's there is a set budget. So the more we use it, the more it's depleted. Fortunately, we keep getting money put into the budget. We haven't, I want to say in the last 3 years, Calhfa hasn't ran out of money because it just keeps getting refurbished. They take another look at taxes, and it benefits the state a lot, right? We're gonna pay more property, we're gonna incentivize the economy of small cities, urban or non-urban areas, it doesn't really matter. So there is changes, there's always changes, which is why we can't take anything for granted in our world. There's changes literally every month. They're not scheduled, but we face them. The changes on Calhfa that happened, that were implemented as of February 1st, were My Home and Zip, which is in the closing cost assistance, are now limited to $10,000 combined. So it was a 2% of the loan value. So if you had a $400,000 purchase, and those $400,000 were a $392,000 loan, it was 2% of that. Regardless of what you're buying, it is 10,000 cutoff for a closing cost. That was the latest change. The interest rates are controlled by the state. They're not controlled by any lender when it comes to down payment assistance. It is determined, the guidelines are strict, there is no flexibility. The interest rate is also set by the lender, no matter who you're dealing with. We're making a loan in the state's name.
It's my understanding that with Calhfa, you have a minimum credit score requirement of 660, okay? But they don't charge that 1 point up front. With GSFA, is the minimum credit score 640, but there's a point charge. Can we use that? Can we use seller concessions to offset that point and use that lower credit score of 640 on the GSFA if we have people that are on the cusp?
The seller concessions to help you offset the 1 point in the origination cost?
Yes. Say you have somebody that's at a 6.
I have children, so my answer is always no. Because it's easier to come back from a no than say yes and then have to tell you no later, right? The upfront fee on GSFA is going to be, I'm gonna say it's a potential. I'm gonna get back to you on that one because I've not implemented that. Nobody's told me no yet, so I'll get you that answer.
Okay, sounds good.
Can I borrow your pen? Because I will get it.
So you mentioned that there's Calhfa, you mentioned another program, so there's two.
Shanoa GSFA.
Those are the only two programs that are
3.
out? There's 3 programs. What's the other one?
Calhfa,
Uh-huh.
GSFA, Shanoa.
So what happened? I thought it was supposed to end of July, like last year or something. Nothing happened.
The budgets keep
Okay.
being.
But it's like an Indian tribe, right, or something? That backs the Chinook one?
No, everything is still through the state.
What state? California?
Yes, you're buying in California, it's not Arizona.
I'm okay with that.
So there's always specific programs. There is a government loan for Native Americans. There's different variations of down payment assistance. We can lend on native land. It's still part of the United States,
California.
right? Why are you hiding over there, Rod? So, any other questions that you guys have?
What makes, or what, do you have anything niche maybe about for New American Funding that kind of sets you guys apart from any other lender that's out there? why should I come with the New American Funding? I gotta ask the
You want
question.
me, you want me to sell you now?
Yeah,
All right.
what's your
What
sales
does
pitch?
New American Funding do that everyone else is not doing? Maybe you may have some niche products out there
We
as
do.
well. So, could you speak to maybe some of those niche products
Absolutely.
that you have?
So one of a few portfolio products, right? New American Funding, we are a mortgage bank, meaning we fund our loans. We're not competing for your checking account or your investment account. All we do is mortgages. We also have the ability to broker, meaning if there's something your conventional bank isn't going to take because there's a twist to it, let's say it's an ITIN loan. Does anybody know what an ITIN is?
Ooh, I had one. I'm trying to get one right now, and they're telling you need like 20% down, 25%. So you do ITIN loans?
I can broker those out.
What is it?
An ITIN is a social security number that is issued to the person only for tax filing purposes. You can't use it for anything else. You're not a citizen, you're not a legal resident.
Oh,
You are just filing taxes for some reason,
okay.
right?
Right. So if I want to buy a house
Mhm.
and I have an I-10, how do I buy? How do I qualify? Because I've been told like basically go kick rocks.
So basically, even with that ITIN, you can still build credit.
Mm-hmm.
So there's still a credit score, possibly, right? And there is not a set in stone limitation to that ITIN loan that I can write. It's not going to be, you need 40% down today, and that's the only way we can do it. It's going to be, the investor is going to run your credit. Based on your credit, based on your loan to, your debt to income, the investor is going to tell you what the interest rate is going to be and what your minimum deposit is going to be. So it's not set in stone.
So an I-10 sounds to me that your interest rate's gonna be higher.
Anything special is going to be high, and that's one thing as realtors that you guys need to understand. Any concessions made, any added difficulty is added risk for the investor. So of course they're going to want to secure their investment better. They're going to ask for a higher down payment. They're going to ask for higher interest rate. They're going to ask for maybe higher origination, but it's added to. It's not one size fits all. So we have the ability to broker off those loans. We have the ability to also make our own loans. For example, our bank statement program, we have 6, 12, 24 month statement program loan. That's made for people like you and me that are commission only or that are self-employed in some industry. And they might declare their taxes, but they also have a bunch of write-offs. In a conventional loan, the majority of those write-offs will deplete your income. In a bank statement loan, for the same self-employed person, we're gonna take a year of bank statements, and we're gonna go through page by page, find their deposits, and give you an average of how much you make as a self-employed person. You are going to require 10 to 20% down because again, it's a riskier loan. But we have the ability to make that loan because it's a portfolio product, meaning we will fund it. It's the investor has determined these are going to be the guidelines. Go get loans.
It's my understanding on work visas that some work visas allow, you can qualify for a loan and other ones you can't.
Correct.
What is the distinction between the two work visas where one person will qualify but one person won't?
There is a lot of work visas. There's not just two. We actually have to have the visa, both sides of it, to be able to run through what specific requirements or allowance they will have. You can have, let's say you're hired to come work, you have a work visa, you have 3-year contract, we're good. But you have to have credit.
So a person on a work visa does not have an I-10?
No, there are so many possibilities in that world. there's I-10s, there's working socials, there's visas, work visa, there is traveling visas, we have to have the specific visa to be able to do the research on that one specific type.
I'm running across that more and more and more in the door knocking world,
Mm-hmm.
where people are having work visas and not I-10s, and so that segregation is something that I don't understand. You know, who
It's-
qualifies and who doesn't.
The expiration time on the work visa will be your first clue. You have to have the longevity to be able to get a loan to buy a property. You have to have, when we're gonna quantify that income, we wanna make sure that no matter who it is, that income will likely continue for the next 3 years. If you're on a work visa and you only have a year on that visa before it expires, there's no guarantee that's gonna be renewed.
I see. So basically, it's gotta be renewable. It has to be a renewable work visa for it to be considered to be qualified for a loan.
It has to have enough lifespan left on that current visa, because we won't be able to determine if that will be renewed, if the work will continue.
Okay. Makes sense, thank you.
Can you go back to, I know we talked about it, but just can you go back to what's an average down payment that someone would need? Now, this is a real scenario that I'm working with right now for an I-10 potential buyer. Like,
A realistic one,
yeah, down payment. What do they need?
25 to 35.
It's a lot.
It is a lot, but they might only be buying a $100,000 house.
That's a good place to start, to get something small, fix it up, maybe even start. To get more of
Right,
your.
to build more
down.
liquidity.
What's the lowest that I would need?
25.
How much?
Well, it depends on the time. Those are some of the regulations like any others, and keep that one in mind. Any guidelines can change from one day to the next. Because you and I made this transaction 3 months ago, that doesn't mean that the guidelines haven't changed and we are not guaranteed to be able to do it again. So let's say that the last time I went through that, we did everything is in-house. We are a California-based company. We're based out of Tustin. That's where our headquarters are. We are, our operations are unlike any other. Promise, that's why I work for them. We have in-house everything. Everybody is at the same office. We are on the same time frame. We're not going to Pennsylvania for our underwriting. They're on the same time frame that we are. So the likelihood of closing that transaction on time will exponentially be higher than any other lender that you have locally. I think that's my strength in New American funding.
Can I say something that I meant, or that I know, or why I like to use for your company over other lenders?
Please.
As far as New American funding goes, I feel that you guys can pre-approve our buyers for higher purchase prices. I'm currently in escrow right now with a couple who originally, it was VA, they went to Navy Federal, they were only pre-approved for $350. New American funding, pre-approved them for $403,000. So,
Now,
I mean, I thought that was a huge difference.
absolutely. The biggest difference between one lender and the other, the government is going to give you your guidelines, your rules. Here it is. On top of those rules, your conventional bank and any bank is going to put on additional rules, which we call overlays. The VA doesn't have a minimum FICO score. The VA doesn't have a maximum loan to value. Anybody that tells you, well, you need a 620 to qualify for a VA, that's an overlay. You don't have one. Anybody that tells you you can only go to 45% debt to income on a VA, that's an overlay. The VA doesn't say that. We don't want to tell our customers, you don't qualify, because that's not coming from VA. That's coming from your overlay. Same thing, I bank with Disclosure, I bank with Navy Federal. But obviously their debt to income, or their debt to income was lower or had a limit. And that's why they said you only qualify for $300 and some dollars.
And I wouldn't be in escrow with my buyers right now if that would have been the cap, because
Right.
they just didn't want a home in that
They
price
couldn't
range.
find anything
They
in that
just,
price
yeah,
range.
nothing was suitable.
So we have a lot more flexibility. We don't have overlays. I used to have to work with 45% debt to income on FHA. I don't anymore. That is, to us, 55.9%. Because that's what FHA says, not what New American Funding says.
So New
Not
America
with
has
Wells
no
Fargo.
overlays whatsoever?
Correct. When it comes to government loans, FHA, VA, conventional.
I have found that more of my transactions have been approved through New American Funding than any other lender. So your flexibility seems to be a lot better, I've noticed in my own transactions.
I believe so too. What is in your experience your biggest determining factor? Has it been loan to value? No,
Well,
has it
it's
been debt to income?
It's been, when we've run into problems. In other words, we've been in the escrow period, situations have come up, like, the debt to income ratio. I'm not talking about down payment assistance, but any of your traditional type of loans. The debt to income ratio is really tight. For some reason, your underwriters at New American Funding seem to be more flexible. They will find ways to get around the problem and make it work. If there's credit issues, sometimes you'll get exceptions on those credit issues. The underwriters will make exceptions and approve the loan. Just a lot of different variables like that inside the transaction, I notice are very flexible. I had a VA transaction where the client literally signed their loan docs and funded and recorded all in the same day. And it had to be done, or there was gonna be issues, consequences accordingly. New American Funding pulled that out and did that in one day. Now that's unheard of, just unheard of for that to happen. So I can go on and name numerous examples like that, but that's where I have been impressed with New American Funding. Reaching out and getting things done.
I kind of like them too. They're all right. In my experience, New American Funding has been more flexible, in my point of view, more flexible. And let me give you a little bit of background. New American Funding is owned by Patty Arviello. Patty Arviello has been a loan officer for 35 years. She's still in the business. It is woman-owned, minority-owned, valued in your transactions, right? As a loan officer, we always want to give you that loan. We always want to fund that loan. Just like you want to sell the house, we want to fund the loan. It's been my observation that our underwriting, like David said, is not more flexible. We're not going to bend the rules. But if there is some consideration or some concession that can be made, they're more willing to make it because of the full picture. Not so much in this one black and white, here's your line, right? Obviously there's lines that can't be crossed. But if there is flexibility to be had, it is allowed.
Well, and that's important, that's been important to me, because usually what's happening, by the time they get to underwriting, you've got 21, 25 days, the transaction is almost over with. At this point, some clients don't listen, and what they do is they put their notice in and they have no place to live, and if their loan doesn't go through, then they have to stay in a hotel room, and it can be a big disaster, as we all know. So that to me, I very much appreciate because it gets us out of jams. Because your company finds ways of getting things approved. Most underwriters are paid to find a way to deny a file, okay? Because they don't want any liability. I've noticed in your company that the opposite is true. Your underwriters actually try to find a way to make the file work. So that's something that I have noticed, and I just wanted to bring that up because that's one of my favorite things about the underwriting fund.
Well, thank you, David. I appreciate it. I agree with it too. They are pretty flexible. Have you had any hard stops that turned your pre-approval into a decline? You've never gone from pre-approval to decline?
Fortunately, no.
That's good.
I have, but it's mostly because the client
Quit their
lost
job.
their job or
They
something.
got discharged from the military
Exactly.
5 days
Things like
before
that.
escrow was supposed to close. That was a good one.
And now they're not getting retirement?
Yeah, they didn't make it up afterwards. Well, yeah, you can't get a loan without a job.
You pre-approve everyone. You pre-qualify all of them, or you do D. What is it? The DU.
DU.
Under. Can you explain? Maybe some of them you don't
So-
understand the difference between the three.
There's prequel. I don't like prequels. So prequel is, I interviewed you, I took your app, you told me everything you wanted to tell me. And based on what you told me, here's your prequel. Oh, I may have ran your credit, because hopefully you told me your social security number. That's nothing. You know nothing, right? We can, that's your prequel. Your prequel is, let's get familiar, let's see what we're dealing with, kind of do a overview of your customer. Pre-approval, that's what you want. You don't want a prequel, you want a pre-approval. A pre-approval has all those documents that I just asked you for, and everything that you've told me has now been verified. Based on that pre-approval, or based on my observation, right, when we have the full file with all the documentation, I'm going to submit it to DU, which is software. It's software that runs, make sure that for the one program we selected, you fit in this box. DU is gonna run it over and go, okay, you are approved. And it's gonna tell you why you're approved and what your conditions should be. We all know what your conditions should be, 99.9% of the time, unless you have something quirky going on. DU, so you have your prequel, which means nothing. It's just a handshake. Your pre-approval, which is you've been vetted. Everything you said has proven to be close enough to what your document said. And we ran you through the software, DU. Now you have a pre-approval letter, and now you have DU. Now you're clear, because hopefully you can go and find a house tomorrow, make an offer, and you have everything you need. I might send you the proof of
I have a
funds.
question on this DU situation, and maybe you can help me clarify it, I'm not sure. On the listings, they always ask for an RPA, they want a proof of funds, they want a DU. These are the things that the other listing agents always want. One of these things, again, is a DU, it's a big deal. But the lenders are saying that they're not supposed to give DUs. They're saying, I'm not supposed to give DUs, but sometimes the lenders will do it anyway, because the real estate industry is requiring DUs on the listings. We're required as a buyer's agent to submit a DU with, with our RPA. We're required to do it. It says it right on the listing. If we don't do it, then what happens is we're not being competitive and somebody else is putting in an offer, maybe doing that, and then they could get the offer accepted over us. But the lending world is saying, we're not supposed to give a realtor a DU. There's conflict there, okay? And so...
Dare I say that's your big bank? You're always gonna get a DU from us.
From you guys, we always
If
do.
you don't have that, you have no way to prove. If you're making an offer in Hamul, the listing agent doesn't know me. I just wrote a letter. It's a PDF. You can edit it, hopefully. People get crafty. And the listing agent is now going to trust my word. And he doesn't know me from Adam. Your DU supports my word, right? Your DU is something we cannot fake. Your DU comes from the software. You have the pre-approval from Anel Moore. You have DU, which is the approval from the software. You have your proof of funds, and you have your RPA. Would you take that offer?
Yep.
Or would you take one that didn't have DU?
You're gonna take one that has a DU.
I've kind of heard the backside of that, where it's like the DU's not worth the paper that it's printed on because it's basically what you put into that software. Now, can you speak?
Well, then you can take that to closing.
Mm-hmm.
So DU, yes, everything is going to be what I put into that software.
Mm-hmm.
But it just gives you an added layer of protection.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, DU is not a closed transaction. DU is gonna tell you, based on the parameters, everything's met. Pending a list of conditions, right off the bat, from
so the
DU.
DU is from like the W-2s and the pay stubs and all that. You get those numbers and putting them into the DU
Correct.
the software.
Mm-hmm.
So as long as you're not an idiot and don't put in the wrong numbers, then it should be fine.
Correct. And you can't quantify that, right?
Yeah.
It just gives you, as a realtor, it just gives you an added layer. If you will have nothing to trust until you close. We may, if, let's say, we're going back to that one. We had FHA DU. We didn't even go FHA. Because the condo that they bought was non-FHA warrantable. It just gives you as a realtor an added layer of, okay, it's your due diligence, my due diligence, it's been ran.
A question kind of regarding that, you might have already answered it. What happens if you change the loan type in the middle of the transaction?
Might not qualify.
So you have to disclose that? You have to,
No.
You have to tell the other side, like, hey, we're not going to.
Felipe, that's on
Okay.
that's on your side. If I change depending on why we changed it,
Yeah.
you know, whether it's the property doesn't qualify, we found a better product.
Right.
At the time of pre-approval, you're running it on a blank canvas.
Right.
You don't have a target. You don't have potential property, right? Most of the time.
I've had that happen before, Chris, actually, where I have written up an RPA with the type of loan that I had the pre-qual and DU for, or
Right.
pre-approval DU for, and in the middle of the transaction, that particular loan went upside down, backwards, and inside out. It
Yeah.
wasn't gonna be approved, it fell out. But there was another loan type that was, so usually I'll go to the lender and I'll just say, can you please write an email to the listing agent stating, we cannot approve on this loan, but we can on this one. And
Okay.
usually if there's validity behind that, then the other side usually will
Cool.
go ahead and accept it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just they don't like they don't like it if they're feeling you're being fraudulent and you're
Right.
tricking them.
Right.
But if there's a legitimate, hey, this does not qualify, we have to go with this one. And if they get credibility from the lender, usually the listing side is okay.
Right.
Cool.
See,
Okay.
did everything happen on that transaction? Because
Because
that was one. We went FHA. They found a property. It was not FHA warrantable. We switched it to conventional.
It happens.
And so in the beginning, what we're gonna do is, Michelle and I pretty much work the same. We're gonna reach out to your realtor, to your listing realtor,
Yeah.
so
Right.
that we're filling in both sides at the same time. You're gonna get your update for your loan,
Yeah.
what step your loan is, but when it goes to you, it's also gonna go to the listing realtor.
Okay.
So we're all going to get the same correspondence. We're all going to know where the progress is. And if there's anything that gets thrown at us,
Yeah.
a curveball or something, we're gonna do the same thing. We're going to make sure that your listing agent is aware of what's going on the other end too. So that we are all, you know, if you're the buying agent, we want you and I to be on the same sheet of music, but we also wanna be communicating the same thing to the listing agent.
Any other questions for now? We're gonna wrap up. Our hour is complete. Thank you so much for coming out and sharing with us today. For me, I know I'm always learning something when it comes to these trainings. So again, thank you so very much for
Thank you
sharing
for
with
that.
us and for all those that came out. Give a round of applause.
Thank you. If there's ever any questions, I mean, all of you have access to our cell phones.
Yeah.
So just reach out to us, ask us a question. It's always better to answer it than to have to trip over it later. Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Yeah.